Hello, everyone, and welcome to the course of U.S. History. This is presented by Mr. Derek Samuelson. That's me. And through this course, I'm going to take you through about 100 to 150 lessons that delve into United States history. It's going to be a long road, so let's get going. Today's lesson is a lesson on the first Americans. We're going to be taking this one in two parts, but I do want to first walk through what you see down here at the bottom of the screen. You will notice pre-colonial America. That's our overall unit. Our subunit, because this will be broken up into different parts, is the first Americans, which also happens to be the title of today's lesson, The First Americans, Part 1. In short, this is lesson 1-1.1 for Unit 1, Subunit 1, Lesson 1. I won't always go through that. In fact, I'll probably never go through that again. We'll just focus on the title of the lesson, but just know it's down there in case you want it. Now, today's lesson. It's about the arrival of people in America. We're not going to start American history with Christopher Columbus and the colonies, although I promise you we will get there. We're going to back things up quite a bit. Now, our story is going to start during an ice age. And until about 10,000 years ago, the world was in an ice age. This is a period of intense cooling of the Earth's surface, which results in a lot of ice, hence the name Ice Age. And as I said, until about 10,000 years ago, we were in one of those. Now, during this ice age, about 30,000 years ago, people start to enter North America. Human beings did not evolve in North America. North America was totally human-free until around 30,000 years ago, when people start to enter into North America. Now, how do they do this? Well, migrating hunters, people who are hungry and chasing their food. They chased their food right into North America. It's as simple as that. Except that they needed to have some sort of path to get into North America. And that wound up being what is today the Bering Strait. Now, if you know enough about geography, you know that a strait is actually a body of water. You can't walk across a strait. It's just water. Well, they were able to do this because the land at the bottom of the sea was exposed because ocean levels themselves were lower. Ocean levels were lower because all of that water in the ocean was getting sucked up into these glaciers, which lowered sea levels. And therefore we had, well, actually it was all a big chunk of ice, not necessarily land, but there was a connection here. And once those glaciers started to melt, once they started to warm a little bit, they split, with half of them going south, half of it going north, exposing this land right in between. And people were able to follow animals as they migrated across that land and into North America. Now, once we have our very first Americans, how are they surviving? Well, they survived by hunting those very same animals that they followed into the continent. These would be your typical woolly mammoth, but also any other types of animals that lived in the region. Now, there was definitely a preference for larger, slower animals. These would be ones that humans would only need to capture a few of them, and you'd be able to eat for a long time. Now, this was not enough for their diet alone, so these people also gathered nuts and berries and fruits and vegetables. Anything that they could find along the way that seemed edible, they would try. Now, as these people survived through hunting these large animals and gathering the food that they found along the way, we have called them hunter-gatherer societies. So these were hunter-gatherers that lived during this time. They didn't farm. They didn't have a concept of farming. They didn't understand seeds could go into the ground, and if you waited long enough, you could grow food from that. This was not how they understood their world. They understood that they needed to follow those animals around because those animals were going to be their main source of food. Now, this starts to shift once that ice age is coming to an end. See, around 10,000 years ago, as the Earth begins to get significantly warmer and as those glaciers start to recede and you've got more and more land without ice, the world is going to change. And it's not just that it's getting warmer, although I'm sure they love the warmth. Um, they're going to have to adapt in other ways, because once it's not so cold and the world starts to change in important ways, they're going to have to adapt to it. And it's more than just having trouble finding ice for their drinks. Large animals are going to die out during this global warming. Now, there's a number of theories, and I don't like to ascribe to a single one. Um, the the whole extinction of these large animals. Certainly, they were hunted in larger numbers as human populations increased during this warming period. Uh, but these are also animals that had evolved for cold weather climates, and surely they were somewhat shocked by this warmer weather. So, but either way we look at it, these giant animals, your mammoths and your giant sloths and your hairy rhinos, they all start to die out during this period. So what are the people going to do? Well, fishing becomes the new easiest way to get food, and that's how people are always going to get their bellies full in the easiest possible way. And if fishing is the easiest way to get your consistent source of calories, then fishing is going to be what you do. And those fishing villages, because you don't have to chase around your food, you just stay near the water, and there's the food supply coming to you. People start to settle down for the first time, and you start to have villages, not just these wandering groups of people chasing after migrating animals. So, from this, once we have settlements, a remarkable transformation starts to occur. People are in an area long enough to notice patterns in nature and to notice that particular plants will produce food every year, and that they could actually manipulate this in a way that would be to their benefit. We start to have crops. Now, the first crops were almost certainly an accident. This was probably not an intentional thing. It's probably like you eat most of a vegetable or a fruit, and you throw it into a pile, maybe with some seeds, and then you notice the next year that you've got plants growing out of that pile of rubbish. And oh my gosh, those plants are going to start to grow the same food that you were eating before. You see, if you had moved your camp every year chasing after animals, you wouldn't necessarily have noticed that. But now that you're sitting in one place, you can have farms. And this is how farming is going to begin. And in North America in particular, also Mesoamerica, Central America, really throughout the Americas, you see maize, which is corn, beans and squash becoming the most important early crops. And they really were widespread throughout the Americas. Now, let's look at the North Americans real quickly. Native Americans quickly spread across North and South America. Once they'd crossed over the Bering Strait, groups moved all the way down into South America very, very quickly. So this was not a gradual spread. People move pretty quickly once they can. In North America, where we're going to focus, they really develop into two different civilizations or culture groups. We're going to be looking at both of these. One of them are the mound builders that were predominantly in the Mississippi and Ohio River valleys, and they're known for building these huge, tremendous mounds. We'll get into them more later. The other are the Anasazi. The Anasazi are in the western parts of the United States, and they're known for building these cliff villages, and that's how we know them, and that's how we're going to get to know them the further we get into our lessons. So what we're going to do now is just kind of preview our next lesson. The next time you visit, we'll be looking at lesson 1-1.2, which is the First Americans Part 2, where we dig into those mound building and Anasazi cultures. Thank you very much for watching today's lesson, and I'm looking forward to next time. Thank you, and farewell.